I am Marwan Cameron, and this is The Conduit. All right, y'all, it is July 5, 2021. It is the day after Independence Day. We're going to have to talk about that today. Oh, boy. It's going to be a long one. It's going to be a barn burner. Rev, how you doing? Rev, can you hear me? All right, Rev is muted here. We're going to go ahead and get our stuff together here momentarily. All right, I can hear you now, Rev. Go ahead.
Hey, I hate to do this, but this is what we're gonna have to do. I'm gonna have to shut down my stream. I'm just gonna come over on your stream because I'm getting.
Oh, don't worry about it. Go ahead, do your thing.
Well, I was getting double talk.
Yeah. Go ahead, shut it down and come on. It's all good.
Okay.
All right. So while Rev does that, let me tell you what's happening. So Rev, of course, has his show and I have mine, and this is an opportunity for us to multicast on our platforms at the same time, and we're using different technology. So, this is Salvage Souls with Reverend Ellington, and of course, Marwan Cameron with the Conduit coming together on Mondays as we do. I've been calling it 2x2 studies, but it's been Salvage Souls this whole time. So, Rev had to correct me on that. So that is what it is. We're going to get together every Monday with you, but we are going to work out what this actually is and how this is going to work, because we are going to use two different platforms. I see Rev dropped his platform off. Rev, how you doing? Are you clear now? You 5x5? He's smiling. I can't hear him, but his camera has improved. So that is definitely one thing. So I know his computer was definitely using a bunch of memory trying to run two platforms and stream live at the same time. So, it is what it is. But we're going to get this thing together. I gotta say, man, I know the Rev has a Mac coming in his life at some point in time, and the Mac is the way to go because he's got his fingers crossed. You know what? I should knock on wood because I haven't had any issues technology-wise since this Mac has been up and running. So it seems to have solved all my problems. So I am a believer. You know what I mean? I am a believer.
Hey, you guys can donate to the Mac calls at 2x2 studies. Just cash out 2x2 studies. Whatever you want to help donate to that.
And he is not kidding because it's not cheap. But we want to bring you good content and bring it to you unobstructed. We want to have a good video feed for you and good audio. But we're going to get into it tonight, and we're going to jump right in. Because we do want to talk about the Independence Day, the 4th of July. What does it mean, to Black America? And obviously it means different things to different people. We're not a monolith, but we're going to go in and read from the Declaration of Independence. We're also going to read the address from Frederick Douglass and then get into the 13th Amendment. So let me go ahead and share that and pull that up. You ready to go, Rev?
Give me 1 second. I'm trying to get all of this on one under one one tab.
No worries. Well, and Rob says that I look good on my end, and you are coming in loud and clear also, Rev. So sounds like it's all good on your end too. All right. So if you want to follow along, you can get to the Declaration of Independence by clicking on the link that I just submitted there. And let me go ahead and type that in the chat for everyone. What's good too is this kind of gives some time for folks to come in. And it's, I got to tell you, there's so many different things in the news for us to talk about. Sometimes it's hard for us to, say, okay, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. It's like, all right, well, what are we going to actually end up talking about? So we had 3 topics tonight, but since it is the day after Independence Day, this was the most appropriate thing. So we'll have conversations about what's going on in Chicago over the past weekend. We'll talk about what's going on with Bill Cosby. I think all these things are really important for us to have discussions about and talk about. But this is definitely, I think, top of mind right now. So that is what we are going to do. Oops, I got to bring Rev back in here. All right, Rev, how you doing? How you feeling?
I'm tops. I'm tops. All right, I got it all squared away. Everything's in one window now, so
All right.
I'm ready. I'm ready to rock.
So we're getting ready to go ahead and read the Declaration of Independence here. As you can see, 1776. You can read along. We put the link in the chat for you. And I think it's an important, we listen to a lot of social media, we listen to a lot of news, and in that, there's a lot of paraphrasing. There's a lot of, this is what I believe this is. There's a lot of cherry picking of different pieces in there. So we're going to read it in its entirety because we know a lot of people are tremendously busy, and we're in a microwave society. So we just kind of take these things in. So Rev is going to go ahead and take it from the top, and then I'll come in on the second page. All right, go ahead, Rev.
All right, so guys, I'm gonna read the preamble and Brother Mawan was saying, and then we're gonna get right into it. So the preamble is this first paragraph you guys see, and it says, "When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation."
All
So
right.
that's the preamble. Now, and before I get into the declaration, uh, guys, pay real close attention to words because words matter so much. What order they're in and what words are used. There's a lot of choices when it comes to saying things, and so the fathers were very purposeful in what they wrote, how they wrote it, and what they were saying. So please, and this is the reason we're reading this, so please pay very close attention. Okay, it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience have shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariable the same object, evince a design to reduce them under absolute deposm. I know I said that wrong. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present king of Great Britain is history of nations, all having in direct object the establishment of an obsolete tyranny over these states. To prove this, let acts be submitted most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distance. Excuse me. I'm trying to get back to the other one. And distance from the dispository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. Brother Marwan.
All right, so I'm going to read the rest. Rev, if you would you restart your computer and rejoin us while I read this second page, because you were dropping in and out there. You're going from gray to red, and some of your words were chopped off there. So I think your memory is still full from running both things.
Okay, so all right, let me yeah, okay. All right,
So if you restart and then just join, by the time it restarts, I'll be done, finished reading it. You know what I mean? So it'll be perfect. Okay. And then we'll talk about it before we move on to the next one.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to pick up where Rev left off. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without consent of our legislatures. He is affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial, for punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretending offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in the neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun, with circumstances and cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress. In the most humble terms, our repeated petitions have been unanswered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be ruler of free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and all the consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind. Enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and authority of the good people of the colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may have a right to do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Now, this is signed by John Hancock, New Hampshire, Josiah Bartlett, Matthew Torrington, William Whipple, Massachusetts Bay, All right. Go ahead and resend the link here to Rev. Give me just a second here. It's asking me to resend him the link. Now, I will say that this is the first time that I have read the Declaration of Independence. So I've got to thank the Rev for that opportunity to do so. You know, it's not something that I read in school. You know, as I only went to the 9th grade, as I shared with you on many other occasions. And it's just not something that I've been interested in doing. And so, you know, this is the first time. And it's good. It's good to read. It's definitely a mouthful for sure, as I've come across a few words that I haven't seen before. And so that's interesting. It's fascinating just with the first read, what they were advocating for and advocating against, right? Wanting their sovereignty and their separation, feeling how I think a lot of, what do you want to call us? African descendants of slaves, ADOS, ADOS, foundational Black Americans, African Americans, Black Americans, Negro Americans. We've been called many things over the annals of time. And I would say that we have many of the same grievances. But it's interesting. So, you know, Rev, he wanted us to read this. And, you know, we're having a conversation about the 4th. And he said, you know, have you read, you know, the Declaration of Independence? And I said, you know, no, I haven't. And he said, have you read the Frederick Douglass letter? I'm like, no, I haven't. And it's like, well, you know, we could do that. I'm like, yeah, let's do it, you know. And for me, I felt like, you know what, let's read the whole thing. Because in my own experience, right, I haven't taken the time to read it. I think many of us in our busy lives, it's not something that we're necessarily going to take time to read. Maybe there was a time when it was required reading from school or, you know, military service. I don't know how that goes. Or maybe it was just, you know, something you were interested in, or you went to go to a museum and you were able to read it then. But it's probably not something that we reflect on a lot, especially a lot of us who, you know, 4th of July comes up, and it's like many other holidays, right? It's the barbecue, it's the summertime, it's the party, it's to put on the new outfit, it's, you know, let's have a good time. So what are we celebrating? You know, we had a conversation about Juneteenth a few weeks back, and you know how I feel about that holiday. And we talk about these things, and it's important to have these conversations, right? We say a lot that you know, we need to know our history. Well, this is part of our history that we do need to know. And so we need a complete history. And so, you know, while we are trying to, on the one hand, and I'm saying we as Black people, not as just, you know, all Americans at this rate, at this second, are trying to learn about what our complete history is, not that we were just slaves and then it's today. It's important that we discover, you know, our history, but also understand, you know, history as a whole from a holistic viewpoint. Welcome back, Rev. How you doing?
Welcome, bro. I mean, hello, brother. As you can see by the background, I'm in a whole nother location.
Yeah, when you were like, send me the link to a different email address. I'm like, Rev, a different email address? What happened?
Yeah. I had to abandon the office and the laptop because I don't know. I got the firewall wouldn't let me connect to the internet, and I ain't want to play around with it right now. So yeah, I just can't. And which is better because I'm on a much more powerful machine. So yeah, we shouldn't have all the issues that we had earlier.
Well, we're all good. So I literally just finished the reading, and I was just telling everyone that this was your idea and that I was thanking you for the opportunity because I had never read the Declaration of Independence or Frederick Douglass's letter. And so I just finished. You were saying to me, pay attention to this second part. Did you want to reflect on, page 2 of this declaration here before we move on?
Yeah, so not just the second. Hey, can you resend me the links? Because again, I'm on another machine, so I don't want to have to go scrolling for them.
And no worries. I'm gonna put them
Yeah,
here in the
yeah.
chat. Actually, there should still be in the chat, honestly.
No, they're not.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I got the. Yeah, I just got the first one. Okay. All right. So not just the first. Okay. Not just the second half of the Declaration of Independence, but the first half just as well. Okay. So if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of start from the beginning and work my way down.
Please do.
Okay. So let me get it open back up. There we go. All right. So now I find words to be very informative, and I like words a lot. I really like words; they're fun. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm reading this, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, okay. Now, if we just from the preamble itself, right? When we look at that preamble and we pay attention to what they're saying, they're saying like, hey, it's okay to like cut yourself off, what I'm saying, from a dying body, what I'm saying,
Mm.
or a corrupt body, or what I'm saying, whatever you want to call it, right? And so it says in the beginning, it says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of earth the separate and equal station. Okay, so right there they're saying, listen, um, there comes a time when you have to say like, okay, we're disconnecting from you, and that's okay, because we're on the same playing field. We're equal to you. And this is a big thing to say to a king, to say like, hey, you know what, we're cutting ourselves off from you, and we look at ourselves as being, what I'm saying, on the same footing as you, despite the fact that, what I'm saying, you're the king, we feel that we have just as much rights, and we're just as entitled or whatever else, as you are, and we want to separate ourselves from you. And there comes in the next part where it says the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the cause. So in other words, listen, God, God sees us as the same. We see ourselves as the same as you. And so listen, now we want to tell you why. We're gonna, we feel it's only right that we, tell you why. And that's why in the second half, you see them start to list out all of these grievances that they have with the king, right?
Right.
But before we get to the second half, even before we get to the second half, they really, dig in on, that idea that these things, that they're after, is should be attainable to everybody, and that these things are God-given rights, and and so forth, right? Which, like I was telling you, you know, we all know, especially us in the community, we all understand that, the Declaration of Independence, when they wrote it and, was pursuing this and all things, it was very hypocritical, to the point that, you guys have other humans enslaved, but at the same time, you're declaring that all humans are created equal, and have, these certain rights, right? And so
Mhm.
that's when we get into the actual declaration. And I just want to go over this first paragraph. It says, "We hold these truths." All right. So it's like, look, this isn't up for debate. These are truths and they're self evident. All men are created equal. And then they said they're endowed by their creator, which is they believe to be God as the creator. All right. And we see that with a capital C. That they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. That means that these rights cannot be disputed, or they're not up for negotiation or anything. These are, saying, your rights. And that those include life. So we have the right to life. We have the right to liberty, which is freedom. Another word for freedom: life, freedom, and to pursue what makes us happy, the pursuit of happiness. Okay. And these first three things are that they're saying, like, every man is endowed with. They, continually to this day deny us these things.
Mm.
And that's why I say it is beyond and I can't think of a more like I can't think of a word like that's more that would express the hypocrisy of this even more, to say, like, and that's not even getting into all the other stuff. Just right there in that first little paragraph, like, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. You continually deny the African American community, the Black community, the Negro community, or whatever else you want to call us, colored, whatever. You continue to deny us of this. And what else I find to be shocking, right? So, like, when as we continue to, like, go into this, and I should have printed this out so I could have, like, highlighted it and been able to find it a little bit better. But they get to a point where they're saying, it's uh how do you say it? Long enough is long enough. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
we've been dealing with this for long enough, and we're at a last, what I'm saying, straw. And we can't do this no more. Like, this is the end of the line. Like, you've been doing this for too long, pretty much. And it's like, for real? Like, okay, so they they began to colonize. Oh, this goes so many different ways. But
Go ahead, pre-trib.
I know, right? So they began to colonize these lands here, uh, somewhere in the mid late 1500s, right?
Mhm.
And when they, like, first come over, but they're not really successful, right? And they need the natives here to assist them in actually gaining a foothold on these lands, because they just aren't successful. Which, is just like, wow. And so that's why it always amazes me when they say, like, oh, this is our country, and so forth, and all the things they say or whatever. But they're not successful. They need the natives to assist them, in being successful or whatever. And so the early 1600s, you really, see them beginning to take a foothold, right?
Mhm.
And we know right around 1619, 1620, depending on who you talk to, we have, the first Africans landing here already, right? So let's even go back to the mid 1500s, and you say, okay, 200 years, and y'all like, hey, enough is enough. We ready to, sever, what I'm saying, the chains, and we're done with you, right? And I look and I say, okay, well, y'all say a couple hundred years is, way too long. And that's where let me go back over here to it. Right here where it says, let me get to the beginning of this. Prudence. indeed will dictate the government's long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. All right. So they're saying, like, hey, you shouldn't just, like, chop off, the king's head and get rid of him and, dispose of your government for, little frivolous things. Right. And
Hmm.
then he says, and accordingly, all experience have shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. So in other words, they're saying, listen, mankind, people are they're more apt to deal with, what I'm saying, the foolishness than to just kind of, like, cut themselves off, right? Like they're you know they're more apt and likely, they're more likely to just, kind of like deal with it, and because it's like, okay, this is just what it is, right?
Right.
But you know they're also saying that, like, okay, at a certain point, enough is enough and enough is enough. What was the Popeye? I've taken all I could take. What do you say? I done taken all I could stand, and I can stand no more. Or
Mhm.
something like that, or whatever. And that's where they at. Like, I can stand no more. Like, we didn't accepted it and everything else. And when you get to looking at their grievances, it's nowhere on the level of, like, what we're enduring even to this day. But okay, hey, different time, whatever. Okay. So it's just like, it amazes me that they wrote this thing, you know while they're holding humans captive,
Mm.
while they're doing abhorrent things to them, unspeakable things that I don't even want to list. We all know the horrific, treatment that we've suffered in this country, and they have the audacity to pen such words, and they begin to make grievances about the king, imposing himself upon them, and meaningless things like, oh, like the first one I read right here, it says he has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. And I think that was like the third or fourth complaint they had made.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, that's the top of your list. That's in your top 10, that the king calling meetings, like, okay, we're gonna meet over in the swamp, what I'm saying, next month, like instead of at Congress Hall or whatever. Like,
Right.
that's your big grievance. That's part of your top 10. Like, let me give you my top 10. You know what I'm saying? Like, for real. Like, if this is, and that's why I go back to what I said. Like, if these are your top grievances, like, you what I had just read, like, you know, people are apt to deal with some stuff because, that's just what they're used to, what they've been dealing with for whatever. But then at a certain point, it's just like, all right, no more. Like, for real? Do you realize what you're doing to other human beings while you complaining about, the king calling meetings, what I'm saying, out of town, away from, your scribes and stuff? Like, for real? That's your top, that's in your top 10. You know what I'm saying? And so I say, okay, well, what if we took this same document, right? And then we start interjecting, what I'm saying, ourselves in the place of uh these Americans, and we then, move the Americans into the place of the king, and then we start listing our grievances. What if we
Right.
took this document and altered it, like, leave all the words and stuff, right? But we just, like, say, okay, we're going to put our grievances instead of your list of grievances, you know. Let me see right here. is a history. Okay, right here it says the history of the present king of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. So, in other words, we finna tell the whole world what you doing. Number one, he has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. Okay, how about we change that and say the history of this present country, the United States of America, is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, and I can go on, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these Black Americans. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. This government has refused to treat us as equals, has refused to treat us with any due respect. I mean, look at what Taney wrote in the Dred Scott case. You know what I'm saying? Like, come
Mhm.
on. Like, so if this is, it's just, I don't know. Okay, what do you think? Let me let me stop ranting.
No, it's good. So I was speaking about it from the perspective of not having read this before, and not finishing high school. So this wasn't a required reading. And I also talked about how as an adult I never really had an interest in reading this. And so what I've heard from the Declaration typically is we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, right? You hear that, like, I have a dream,
Yeah, yeah.
cherry picked. But you don't hear this other part. He has endeavored to prevent the pop of these states for the purpose of obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has refused for a long time, after such disillusion, to cause others to be elected, whereby legislative powers incapable of annihilation have been returned to the people at large for their exercise, right? They're trying to do away with voting rights again. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. And so I think about our, the white nationalists that exist here, and how now it was just a field trip for these white supremacist groups that overtook the Capitol on January 6th. They just locked up a 76-year-old I think she's a grandmother. She was released into home confinement during COVID because, of course, she's 76 years old. She happened to be taking a basic Microsoft Word class and missed her check-in phone call. And they are sending her back to prison. And she's apologizing to her mother, who she's taking care of, who still happens to be alive, who I believe is either in her late 80s or 90s. And it's like, okay, so, they said, well, because we didn't know what
she was on parole. Is this what?
No, they released her into like house arrest because of COVID, right?
Okay,
She's in her
okay,
70s.
okay.
Right?
I got you. I follow now. Okay, go ahead.
So it's like, okay, so what they said was, well, she could have been out robbing a bank. Really? Yeah. So she's done almost all of her time. She's in her late 70s. She's been released. There's proof and documentation that she was in the class. It's part of her required thing to do. And she just happened to miss the phone call. And now she's got to go back to prison. Now make that make sense, right?
I cannot. But along those lines, we see, and I don't want to jump ahead. But along those lines, we see the same thing happening, in which we're going to get into, as we, All right, I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna save that because if
Go
I
ahead,
do,
save it.
if
Yeah,
I
you're
do,
ready
it's
to
gonna jump.
unload.
Yeah, it's gonna jump off into, and we said we're gonna do this in a certain order. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
hold that one. I'm gonna hold that one.
All
But
right.
that is in par with American history. I'll just say that as a
Yeah.
teaser. That's
Yeah.
in par. That's par for the core for American history. Yes, yes.
Or this part here, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit, or the inhabitants of these states. Right. So, you've got Derek Chauvin, who gets 22 and a half years, which is,
Mm.
a bit laughable for executing a man in broad daylight, for the length of time that it took for him to kill him, with his hands in his pocket. Right.
Tortured
Particularly,
him to death.
right. And so my stance on that is, as an officer of the law, you are held to a higher standard. So if you break the law, then you should be punished more harshly than just a regular citizen, right? You were taking an oath to protect and serve, and you did the opposite of that. And so you've got things like qualified immunity, and so many people aren't charged. They can just move to another precinct. It's a grand jury. No one hears. The prosecutors, withhold evidence. Right. All of this criminality in the same system that they have created that is unjust, and we cannot get justice from ourselves. Right. Which is how
Yeah.
you can have, a 76-year-old Black woman going back to prison. And it's just, oh, well, it's the letter of the law when we want it to be the letter of the law. It's the spirit of the law when we want it to be the spirit of the law. And, we're right. We're white and we said so, and we make the laws. So, and then it's like, well, if you want to change it, then, run and you can change the law. Right. But
Yeah.
we know that it's pretty much, set up. Doesn't matter what side you vote for, the outcome remains pretty stagnant and the same, right?
Oh yeah.
This was interesting reading this and listening to their grievances for imposing taxes on us without our consent. You think about how many felons that we have in our community, and the fact that once they have served their time, right, and are back in society, that they're now having taxation without representation, right? That they can't vote, they can't carry arms, which I thought was a right. You should be able to protect yourself or use it to, feed yourself or whatever. And so it's set up. When we get into the 13th Amendment, we'll talk about that, where it's still built in to be a new form of slavery, right? It never actually ended. And like you were saying, we'll save that for later. So, this is interesting. Did you want to say anything else about this part? Because you were like, wait till we get to the second page. And, I had to read that. So I'm trying to digest it while I'm reading it.
I know I just find the whole document to just be so encourageable. Um, let me open back up the document because yeah, it's been a while since I've other than today that I've actually read this. So I'm kind of the same way where you're at. I'm like processing it while I'm reading it, but
I think the irony is when they wrote this, they were feeling uh, as though they were living in an unjust system, but somehow at the same time they can't see that they are oppressing us in the same system, right?
yeah, yeah.
That in a lot of ways is even worse than what they were under. So it's interesting how they can't see that, and believe, oh, hey, you know what, everything's all good and it's better. Yeah, just very bizarre.
It is. This is a very weird document in its entirety. Um I mean, just in its complete entirety, it's just very weird, on so many levels, and of course we're looking at it from our angle, right?
Right.
Of being the descendants of enslaved humans that were stolen, from their land, their families, uh, their loved ones, their way of life, their culture, all of this stolen from them, right? Brought over here, and then the people that does this to them, they decide that, hey, you know what, we're no longer kind of liking the way uh, our government is, so we're going to tell them off and kind of have start our own thing while you continue to keep us, in bondage. You're, demanding and declaring your right to be free, you know and then now looking at this in another prism, from the natives of this land.
Hmm.
You came over here and stole the very land that you're now declaring that is to be free and independent from. like on so many levels, like, where the audacity, and then this is continuing. This has never stopped. This has been their thinking, their mindset from day one, right? Like, we're going to steal what we want, no matter what it is. We're going to steal what we want. Like I said, they weren't surviving. They could not get a foothold on this land because they didn't know how to survive over here. And so the natives had to help them and educate them and teach them, survival skills to be able to survive over here. And then you turn around and stick the knife in their back, which is, like, on a whole nother level. And you guys, this country is still, playing the same, games over and over and over and over again. They're doing the
So let me
same
ask you a
things.
question, Rev.
Yeah.
That I don't think I've ever heard anyone really ask or answer. So, based on that, do you think that, the reason why we find ourselves in this situation now is that they allowed the indigenous people to live? Like, they didn't totally wipe them out. And had they done that, then there wouldn't be this contradiction in the American experience and existence, right? And at the same time, if they had murdered all of the slaves when they were done with them, then they wouldn't have 13% of their population, right, of their citizens that are a part of them that are like, hey, we have no home, we're here. We're not of this land. Well, technically we are. We were born on this land, right? The descendants were, but we
Yeah.
didn't have a choice. We didn't immigrate from here. So we've got this unique perspective, and so now we're kind of caught in this thing where you have colonizers that have brought us here, taken over the land from the indigenous people, didn't kill them all, so that now they're here and they exist simultaneously, and they have to give them some acknowledgments, right? And that's been a fight for hundreds of years to get what they've gotten, and they still haven't gotten everything. And then at the same time, you, and I'm putting it in quotes, you freed the slaves, but you didn't kill them all. So now they're still here. They can't go back to their homeland, right? We can't go back to Japan or the Philippines or China or anywhere else, South America. We don't know our people, right? We're separated from that. So we're in this unique space where it's like, okay, so how do we continue to exist, right? And then how do they make reparations and make it right?
So one thing I'm going to say is, it's not that they didn't, kill all the natives. I would say they couldn't. You know, I don't think they were capable of doing so. They definitely tried. They definitely tried, but they couldn't. Yeah, they were superior invading force, but for several reasons they couldn't. They just could not do that, and that's a whole nother topic. I'm not gonna go off on it into that tangent. But as far as making whole, and this is why we see such such a fight against, reparations, against, doing right by us and by the natives. there needs to be reparations to both groups, if you ask me. You know, we look at right now, the fights that are going on in several parts of this country, over tribal lands, right? The
Hmm.
tribal lands are, like, there were treaties signed, which we know historically have been violated, you know. So that's par for the course for, again, for America, to violate the treaties. Um, and so right now there's several different places. There's a oil pipeline they're trying to bring in, line number 3 or whatever. There's a huge fight going, and they're trying to go right through tribal lands and just act like, this isn't, sovereign land, you know. And if you ask me, this whole country belongs to the natives, and we're all, should be thankful that they let us stay. Well, I suppose, in that sense, like you were saying, we were born here, so um, we're natives now as well. But I think you get what I'm saying. Like, uh, um, back to the point.
Hmm.
America needs to make whole and repair, what I'm saying, the natives, for the wrongs and atrocities that they did to them. The treaties, they were um cheated and swindled and taken advantage of, in a lot of those deals. And we know this through history and documents and so forth, having them, write X's and, language that they couldn't even read, and, all this type of stuff. I don't know if you've been seeing, and America's not alone in this. Neighbors to the north, same thing. I know you've been seeing on the news all these burial grounds. The stuff they did to the natives of this land was just as horrific. And there needs to be acknowledgement and reparations for that, just as much as there needs to be acknowledgement and reparations for what they did to us. And that's one thing I can say. And I know you may remember the movie Hotel Rwanda,
Hmm.
where the Rwandans and the Houthi, they were at each other, and it was this genocide or whatever. But after all of that dust settled down, they had these courts of reparation, these truth, truth and conciliation. I think that's what they were called. And I think he may have passed, but you remember Bishop Desmond? Say it again.
Desmond Tutu.
Yes, yes. He was instrumental in bringing all of that about. And what happened was, they would bring, the perpetrators and the survivors together. And, it went a long way for healing, because the perpetrators, listen, they admitted to their wrongs and what they did. And the survivors got to express, what I'm saying, their emotions, from the trauma they suffered throughout that or whatever. Um, that's something we've never had. And every uh, instance that I've looked at, most nations do that. Germany did that after World War II. They acknowledge their wrong. And America seems unwilling to acknowledge their wrong. They just simply want to say, "Yeah, it happened. Let's just move on." Like, let's just forget it. Like, no, you need to truly, truly acknowledge, like, yeah, what y'all really did was some demonic stuff. And then y'all need to, shut the heck up and hear out the pain and suffering that we still endure. And there's been scientific studies that show that trauma can be passed down genetically.
Mm.
So it's not that we actually have to live it. The trauma that our ancestors endured is passed down. It can be passed down genetically. you know, to the point where it's like, yeah, we can still, you know, that's why certain things like, you know what I'm saying, you know, you get some white cops behind you and it's like, you know, instantly. You know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? You ain't never had to, you know, ain't doing nothing, you know. Like I'm a legit guy. I got a license, I got insurance, you know, I do stuff by the book, but the cops get behind me, I'm like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It like, for what? You know, that's because it's in my genes. And we know where, and then you have Amanda Ellington FaceTime video. That's the wife. uh, y'all excuse the
That's a
Rev.
decent
I
color
can't ignore
playoff.
the wife. Hey, babes, I'm doing my mashup show. Can I call you when I get done? All right, love you. Bye. Uh, so we know uh where was I at? But anyway, we, you know, this trauma is passed down, and so we still endure it, and we need to be able to voice, you know what I'm saying, our trauma. We need to be able to voice, you know what I'm saying, without somebody saying, oh, you know, why you got to bring this back up and this and that. Let us, you know what I'm saying, have our say, you know what I'm saying, and y'all accept that and you know, apologize, and you know, let's not just, oh, okay, well, you didn't say what you had to say. Let's move on. No, we, now that I didn't say what I had to say, something got to be done, something tangible. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? And so, you know, when we say reparations, you know, all the white people here, and forgive me, white people listening, I ain't talking about all of y'all. Okay. So I'm not stereotyping, all right? But y'all know who y'all is that, you know, think these ways. But anyway, you know, all they hear is, you know, money. How much is it gonna cost? How much is it gonna cost? You know, and you know, it's only a matter of cost when it's things that they don't want to pay for. You know, this country doesn't want to pay for it. And it's oh, where's the money gonna come from in a matter of cost? But when it's, you know, we know that the country has the money, you know, has the means, you know, but it's not just about money. You know, yeah, that's a part of it, but that's not, you know what I'm saying, the whole kit and caboodle. Because I mean, that's the same way you look at these settlements that constantly keep happening over these police shootings, right? Uh, that doesn't make those families whole, you know. I guarantee you, you know, George Floyd's family is not sitting there like, yeah, you know, oh, we much better now. We got, you know, this money. You know, Breonna Taylor's mom is not, you know, sitting back like, oh yeah, you know, it's all good. You know, they pay me. No, no, that's not the end of it. You know, and so yeah, we got work to do, bro. There's real work to do, and it's gonna take uh some young folk, you know, to step up and start doing it, because these older people, they're playing the waiting game, where it's like, hey, I'm gonna sit, you know what I'm saying, in this seat as long as I can until I get find somebody that I can indoctrinate enough to know that they're gonna carry on my legacy of thinking, and then I'm gonna, you know, put all my weight and everything behind them to get them into, you know what I'm saying, my position, so that they carry on what I'm doing. And I would love to see just once, if America would just sit there and fire every single politician, like all the senators, all the congressmen, all y'all been sitting up. Look, just fire every single one of them and put new fresh blood in there. Just really shake it up. Like, yeah, all gone. You're fired. You know, ain't no Pelosi, ain't no Schumer, or what's the other one on the other side, on your side, that you like? The
On what side? The
McConnell.
Republican side?
On your side that you like.
Oh, you mean like Marjorie Green Taylor?
Oh, get exile too. Yeah, exile too. But yeah, we need fresh blood, man. We got to do something about that. So that's my rant. That's my rave. You know, I never behave.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? I think it's great that you know, we're going to go into the Frederick Douglass letter, because a lot of Black Americans feel this way, and we don't talk about it, right? And it's something, just kind of as a quick thought of what indigenous people think when the 4th of July is celebrated, right? And all across the land, these fireworks are just, it's just this pomp and circumstance, it's like rubbing it in, right? I mean, that's really interesting. I'd love to have a conversation and maybe have and just understand what that feels like. I think I've got an idea, you know what I mean? But wow, it's good, like the nerve, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
yeah.
it just is what it is. We justify it, okay, well, we did it. We've acknowledged it was wrong. That was 200 years ago, 400 years ago. We got to move on. What else do you want us to do? We've acknowledged it. Things aren't going to get better if we just keep bringing it up, right? All the talking points that they say. And the thing is that we haven't dealt with it. That's why it continues to be an issue, right? And the more entrenched you go, the worse it's going to get. And the longer it's going to be before there is resolution, right? And that's why you see such separation and division. And it's like, oh, well, it's a class issue. It's not a race issue. And it's, this, that, and the other. But yeah, we'll stop it right here just for the conversation as far as the Declaration of Independence. We're going to go ahead and switch now to the Frederick Douglass letter. What to the slave is the 4th of July. And this was written in 1852. Okay. So I'm going to do a short break. We're not going to go anywhere, but if you want to get something to drink, use the restroom for a second. We're going to go ahead and get this set up for our reading.
Amen.
Because if you haven't read this letter is a bit lengthy. But again, it's so important. This is American history. And most of us don't know it. I've never seen it. I haven't seen it. I've heard about it. But again, I haven't read it. And so this will be my first time. So I do apologize. When you're reading something for the first time, it's going to be rough. Depending on their vocabulary. Reading the Declaration, it was like some of the words in there was like, what?
Yeah.
What is that?
And I'm enunciations get a little tricky. That usurpation, which I know the root word is to usurp, to take over something. But it's like, why couldn't you just use the plain word?
Can you use it in a sentence?
Yeah.
What is the root word? Can you say the word again? Okay.
Hey, help me out with this, man. Come on. That's the bottom line on it. Can you help me out?
All right. Well, I did put it in the chat for you if you want to bring it up, if you want to take a look at it for later. I think I can't wait to read it and gain some insight and understanding and learn a little bit more about American history and Black history all at the same time.
I could tell you, Frederick, man,
he goes in.
He's deep, bro. And Frederick was smart. The man had, was very intelligent. Was a very, how the white folk be like, oh, Obama was very well spoken. Man, they ain't heard nothing till you start listening to Frederick. That's how he made his money. He was an orator. The abolitionists, they hooked them up. They sent them around to different places, to give speeches, and that's how he made his living as an orator. The brother is, he's on the money. He is on the money.
Well, let's go ahead and get into it then. I will go ahead and read the first page. We're going to alternate this thing because it is about 19 pages long. And so we're going to go ahead and begin. This is Frederick Douglass. What to the slave is the 4th of July, 1852. Mr. President, friends, and fellow citizens, he who could address this audience without a quelling sensation has stronger nerves than I have. I do not remember ever to have appeared as a speaker before any assembly more shrinkingly nor with greater distrust of my ability than I do this day. A feeling has crept over me quite unfavorable to the exercise of my limited powers of speech. The task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. I know that apologies of this sort are generally considered flat and unmeaning. I trust, however, that mine will not be so considered. Should I seem at ease, my appearance would much misrepresent me. The little experience I have had in addressing public meetings in country schoolhouses avails me nothing on the present occasion. The papers and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. This certainly sounds large and out of the common way, for it is true that I have often had the privilege to speak in this beautiful hall and to address many who now honor me with their presence. But neither their familiar faces nor their perfect gauge, I think I have of Corinthian Hall, seems to free me of embarrassment. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is to me a matter of astonishment as well as of gratitude. You will not therefore be surprised if in what I have to say I evince no elaborate preparation nor grace, my speech with any high-sounding exordium. With little experience and with less learning, I have been able to throw my thoughts hastily and imperfectly together, and trusting to your patient and generous indulgence, I will proceed to lay them before you. Thus, this, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This to you is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance, and to the signs and to the wonders associated with that act and that day. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. 76 years through a good old age for a man is but a mere speck in the life of a nation. 70 is a lot of time for individual men, but nations numbers their years by thousands.
According to this fact, you are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon. The eye of the reformer is met with angry flashes, portending disastrous times, but his heart may well beat lighter at the thought that America is young and that she is still in the impressible stage of her existence. May he not hope that the high lessons of wisdom, of justice, and of truth will yet give direction to her destiny. Were the nation older, the patriot's heart might be sadder, and the reformer's brow heavier. Its future might be shrouded in gloom, and the hope of its prophets go out in sorrow. There is consolation in the thought that America is young. Great streamers are not easily turned from channels, worn deep in the course of ages. They may sometimes rise in quiet and stately majesty and inundate the land, refreshing and fertilizing the earth with her mysterious properties. They may also rise in wrath and fury and bear away on their angry waves and accumulated wealth of years of toil and hardship. They, however, gradually flow back to the same old channel and flow on as sincerely, as serenely as ever. But while the river may not be turned aside, it may dry up and leave nothing behind but the withered branch and the unsightly rock, to howl in the abyss sweeping the wind, the sad tale of departed glory. As with rivers, so with the nations. Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government, and England as the fatherland. This home government, you know, although a considerable distance from your home, did, in the exercise of its parental prerogatives, impose upon its colonial children such restraints, burdens, and limitations as, in its mature judgment, it deemed wise, right, and proper. But your fathers, who had not adopted the fashionable idea of this day of the infallibility of government and the absolute character of its acts, presume to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far in their excitement as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. Quietly submitted to. I scarcely need say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers. Such a declaration of agreement on my part would not be worth much to anybody. It would certainly prove nothing as to what part I might have taken had I lived during the great controversy of 1776. To say now that America was right and England wrong is exceedingly easy. Everybody can say it. The dastard, not less than the noble brave, can flippantly descant on the tyranny of England towards the American colonies. It is fashionable to do so, but there was a time when when to pronounce against England and in favor of the cause of the colonies tried men's souls. They who did so were accounted in their day plotters of mischief, agitators, and rebels, dangerous men.
To side with the right against the wrong, with the weak against the strong, and with the opposed against the oppressor, here lies the merit, and the one which of all others seems unfashionable in our day. The cause of liberty may be stabbed by the men who glory in the deeds of your fathers, but to proceed, feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. Their conduct was wholly unexceptionable. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn, yet they persevered. They were not the men to look back. As the sheet anchor takes a firmer hold when the ship is tossed by the storm, so did the cause of your fathers grow stronger as it breasted the chilling blast of kingly displeasure. The greatest and best of British statesmen admitted its justice, and the loftiness eloquence of the British Senate came to its support. But with this blindness, which seems to be the unvarying characteristic of tyrants, since Pharaoh and his host were drowned in the Red Sea, the British government persisted in the extractions complained of. The madness of this course, we believe, is admitted now, even by England, but we fear the lesson is wholly lost on our present ruler. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under the treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we at the distance of time regard it. The timid and the prudent, as has been intimated, of that day were of course shocked and alarmed by it. Such people lived, had lived before, and will probably ever have a place on this planet. And their course in respect of any great change, no matter how great the good be attained or the wrong to be redressed by it, may be calculated with as much precision as can be the course of the stars. They hate all things but silver, gold, and copper change. Of this sort of change, they are always strongly in favor. These people were called Tories in the days of your fathers, and the appellation probably conveyed the same idea that is meant by more modern, though somewhat less euphonious term, which we often find in our papers applied to some of our old politicians.
Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the Old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. And as we seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equal to this, it may refresh your minds and help my story if I read it. Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be dissolved. Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny. Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So, indeed, I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost. From the round top of your ship of state, dark and threatening clouds may be seen, heavy billows like mountains in the distance, disclose to the huge forms of flinty rocks. That bolt drawn, that chain broken, and all is lost. Cling to this day, cling to it, and to its principles, with the grasp of a storm tossed mariner to a spar at midnight. The coming into being of a nation in any circumstance is an interesting event. But besides general considerations, that were peculiar circumstances which make the advent of this republic an event of special attractiveness, the whole scene, as I look back to it, was simple, dignified, and sublime. The population of the country at the time stood at the insignificant number of 3 millions. The country was poor in the munitions of war. The population was weak and scattered, and the country a wilderness unsubdued. There were then no means of concert and combination such as exists now. Neither steam nor lightning had then been reduced to the order of discipline. I'll let you take it up there.
From the Potomac to the Delaware was a journey of many days. Under these and innumerable other disadvantages, your fathers declared for liberty and independence and triumphed. Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men too, great enough to give fame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to rise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainty, the most favorable. And yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes. And for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. They loved their country better than their own private interest. And though this is not the highest form of human excellence, all will concede that is a rare virtue, and that when it is exhibited, it ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests. They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitation against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled. That was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times. How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politician of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in the strength into the distant future. They seized upon eternal principles and set a glorious example in their defense. Mark them, fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, honorably inviting the scrutiny of an onlooking world, reverently appealing to the heaven to attest the sincerity, soundly comprehending the solemn responsibility they were about to assume, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them. Your fathers, the fathers of this republic, did most deliberately under the inspiration of glorious patriotism and with the sublime faith in the great principles of justice and freedom, lay deep the cornerstone of the national superstructure which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you.
Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm. Banners and pendants wave exuberantly on the breeze. The din of business, too, is hushed. Even Mammon seems to have quieted his grasp on this day. The ear-piercing fife and the stringing drum unite their accents with the ascending peal of 1,000 church bells. Prayers are made, hymns are sung, and sermons are preached in honor of this day, while the quick martial tramp of a great and multitudinous nation, echoed back by all the hills, valleys, and mountains of a vast continent, bespeak the occasion one of thrilling and universal interest, a nation's jubilee. Friends and citizens, I need not enter further into the causes which led to this anniversary. Many of you understand them better than I do. You could instruct me in regard to them. That is a branch of knowledge in which you feel, perhaps, a much deeper interest than your speaker. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narrated at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls, and are as familiar to you as household words. They form the staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I remember also that as a people, Americans are remarkably familiar with all facts which make in their own favor. This is esteemed by some as a national trait, perhaps a national weakness. It is a fact that whatever makes for the wealth or for the reputation of Americans and can be had cheap will be found by Americans. I shall not be charged with slandering Americans if I say I think the American side of any question may be safely left in American hands. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to other gentlemen whose claims to have been regularly descended will be less likely to be disputed than mine. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and his cause is the ever living now. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act, act in the living present, heart within, and God overhead. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future, to all inspiring motives, to noble deeds which can be gained from the past. We are welcome. But now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers unless your children are the blessed by your labors.
You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence. Sidney Smith tells us that men seldom eulogize the wisdom and virtues of their fathers, but to excuse some folly of wickedness of their own. This truth is not a doubtful one. There are illustrations of it near and remote, ancient and modern. It was fashionable hundreds of years ago for children of Jacob to boast. We have Abraham to our father, when they have long lost Abraham's faith and spirit. That people contented themselves under the shadow of Abraham's great name, while they repudiated the deeds which made his name great. Need I remind you that a similar thing is being done all over this country today? Need I tell you that the Jews are not the only people who built the tombs of the prophets and garnished the sepulchres of the righteous? Washington could not die till he had broken the chains of his slaves, yet the monument is built up by the price of human blood. And the traitors in the bodies and souls of men shout, "We have Washington to our father." Alas, that it should be so, yet so it is. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, both your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden be easy and delightful. For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy could not warm him? Who so obdurate and dead to the claims of gratitude that would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who so stolid and selfish that would not give his voice to swell the hallelujahs of the nation's jubilee when the chains of servitude had been torn from his limbs? I am not that man. In a case like that, the dumb might eloquently speak, and the lame might leap as an hart. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery, sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? If so, there is a parallel to your conduct. And let me warn you that it is dangerous to copy the example of the nation whose crimes, lowering up to the heaven, were thrown down by the breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in irrevocable ruin. I can today take up that plaintive lament of the peeled and woe-smitten people.
By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they who wasted us required of us mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions, whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view. Standing there, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July.
whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present. The conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and the crushed, excuse me, excuse me, standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity which is outraged, in the name of liberty which is feathered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not use the severest language. I will use the severest language I can command. And yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice or who is not at heart a slaveholder shall not confess to be right and just. But I fancy I hear someone of my audience say, it is just in the circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists failed to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause which be much more like to succeed? But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? That point is conceded already. Nobody doubts it. The slaveholder themselves acknowledge it in the slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government.
They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia, which, if committed by a black man, no matter how ignorant he be, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? The manhood of the slave is conceded. It is admitted, in fact, that the Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slaves to read or write. When you can point to any such law in reference to the beast of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle of your hills, when the fish of your sea, and the reptiles that crawl shall be enabled to distinguish the slave from the brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man. For the present is not enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. It is not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working on metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in the families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing that the worshiping the Christian's God and looking hopefully for the life of immorality. Beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty, that he is rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is that the question for Republicans? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty involving the doubtful application of the principle of justice? Hard to be understood. How should I look at today in the presence of Americans dividing and subdividing a discourse to show how men have natural right of freedom, speaking of it relatively and positively, negatively and affirmatively? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know slavery is wrong for him. What am I to argue? That it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons and hunt them with dogs, to sell them into auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to bum their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters. Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with the pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and my strength than such arguments would imply.
What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought that which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? They that can, may. I cannot. The time for such argument is past. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting, reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The property of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What, to the American slave, is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgiving, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and despotisms of the old world, travel through South America, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America resigns without a rival. Take the American slave trade, which we are told by the papers is especially prosperous just now. Ex-Senator Benton tells us that the price of men was never higher than now. He mentions the fact to show that slavery is in no danger. This trade is one of the peculiarities of American institutions. It is carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this confederacy, and millions are pocketed every year by dealers in this horrid traffic. In several states, this trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called in contradistinction to the foreign slave trade, the international slave trade. It is probably called so too in order to divert from it the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated.
That trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy. It has been denounced with burning words from the high places of the nation as an execrable traffic. To arrest it, to put it into it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak this foreign slave trade as most inhuman traffic, opposed alike to the laws of God and of man. The duty to expatriate and destroy it is admitted even by our doctors of divinity. In order to put an end to it, some of these last have consented that their colored brethren, nominally free, should leave this country and establish themselves on the western coast of Africa. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much extrication is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation and their business is deemed honorable. Behold, the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover. I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all the southern states. They perambulate the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers armed with a pistol, a whip, a bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill. Mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along, and the inhuman wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries on his affrighted captives. There, see the old man with locks thinned and grayed. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun. Her briny tears falling on her brow of the babe in her arms. See, too, that girl of 13 weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of her mother, from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle, the fetters clank, and the chain rattles simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with the scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child, and her change, the gash on her shoulder, tells her to move on. Follow the drove to New Orleans. Attend the auction, see men examined like horses, see the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever. and never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from the scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where under the sun you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at a moment in the ruling part of the United States. I was born amid such sights and scenes. To me, American slave trade is a terrible reality. When a child, my soul was often pierced with the sense of horrors. I lived on Philpott Street, Fells Point, Baltimore, and have watched where the wharves, the slave ships, and the basins anchored from the shore with their cargoes of human flesh, waiting for favorable winds to waft them down the Chesapeake.
There was, at that time, a grand slave mart kept at the head of Pratt Street by Austin Woodfolk. His agents were sent into every town and county in Maryland, announcing their arrival through the papers and on flaming handbills, headed "Cash for Negroes." These men were generally well-dressed men and very captivating in their manners, ever ready to drink, to treat, and to gamble. The fate of many a slave has depended upon the turn of a single card, and many a child has been snatched from the arms of its mother by bargains arranged in the state of brutal drunkenness. The fleshmongers gather up their victims by dozens and drive them, chained, to the General Depot at Baltimore. When a sufficient number have been collected here, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or to New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, they are usually driven in the darkness of night. For since the anti-slavery agation, a certain caution is observed. In the deep, still darkness of midnight, I have been often aroused by the dead, heavy footsteps and the impetuous cries of the chained gangs that passed our doors. The anguish of my boyish heart was intense, and I was often consoled when speaking to my mistress in the morning to hear her say that the custom was very wicked, that she hated to hear the rattle of the chains and the heart-rending cries. I was glad to find one who sympathized with me in my horror. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today an active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lusts, caprice, and rhapsody of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight. In this land your fathers love, the freedom which they toil to win, is this the earth whereon they move? Are these the graves they slumber in? But a still more inhumane, disgraceful, and scandalous state of things remains to be presented. By an act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in its most horrible and revolting form. By that act, Mason and Dixon's lines has been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States.
The power is coextensive with the Star Spangled Banner and American Christianity. Where these go, may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He is the bird for the sportsman's gun. By the most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad Republican domain is hunting ground for men, not for thieves and robbers, enemies of society, merely, but for men guilty of no crime. Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state, our lords, nobles, ecclesiastics enforce as a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God, that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have within the past 2 years been hunted down and without a moment's warning hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children dependent on them for bread, but of this no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage and to all rights in this republic, the rights of God included. For black men, there are neither law, justice, humanity, nor not religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery, and $5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any two villains is sufficient under this hell black enactment to send the most pious and exemplary black man into the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witness for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor. Let this damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe and are bound in deciding in the cases of men's liberty. Hear only his accusers. In glaring violation of justice, in shameless disregard of the forms of administrating law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in the diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislation. I doubt if there be another nation on the globe having the brass and the baseness to which such law on the statute book. If any man in this assembly thinks differently from me in this matter and feels able to disprove my statements, I will gladly confront him at any suitable time and place he may select. I take this law to be one of the grossest infringements of Christian liberty. And if the churches and the ministers of our country were not stupidly blind or most wickedly indifferent, they too would so regard it. At the very moment that they are thanking God for their enjoyment of civil and religious liberty and for the right to worship God according to the dictates of their own conscience, they are utterly silent in the respect to the law which robs religion of its chief significance and makes it utterly worthless to a world lying in wickedness.
Did this law concern the mint, ands, and cumin, abridge the right to sing psalms, to partake of the sacrament, or to engage in any of the ceremonies of religion, it would be smitten by the thunder of 1,000 pulpits. A general shout would go up from the church, demanding repeal, repeal, instant repeal. And it would go hard with the politician who presumed to solicit the votes of the people without inscribing this motto on his banner. Further, if this demand were not compiled with another, Scotland would be added to the history of religious liberty, and the stern old Covenanters would be thrown into the shade. A John Knox would be seen at every church door and heard from every pulpit, and Fillmore would have no more quarter than was shown by Knox to the beautiful but treacherous Queen Mary of Scotland. The fact that the church of our country, with fractional exceptions, does not esteem the fugitive slave law as a declaration of war against religious liberty implies that the church regards religion simply as a form of worship, an empty ceremony, and not a vital principle requiring active benevolence, justice, love, and goodwill towards man. It esteems sacrifice above mercy, psalm singing above right doing, solemn meetings above practical righteousness. A worship that can be conducted by persons who refuse to give shelter to the houseless, to give bread to the hungry, clothing to the naked, and who enjoy obedience to the law forbidding these acts of mercy, is a curse, not a blessing to mankind. The Bible addresses all such persons as scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, who pay tithe of mint, ants, and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. But the church of this country is not only indifferent to the wrongs of the slave, it actually takes sides with the oppressors. It has made itself the bulwark of American slavery and the shield of American slave hunters. Many of its most eloquent divines, who stand as the very lights of the church, have shamelessly given the sanction of religion and the Bible to the whole slave system. They have taught that man may properly be a slave, that the relation of master and slave is ordained of God, that to send back and escape bondman to his master is clearly the duty of all the followers of the Lord Jesus Christ. And this horrible blasphemy is palmed off upon the world for Christianity. For my part, I would say, welcome infidelity, welcome atheism, welcome anything in preference to the gospel as preached by those divines. They convert the very name of religion into an engine of tyranny and barbarous cruelty, and serve to confirm more infidels. In this age, than all the infidel writings of Thomas Paine, Voltaire, and Bolingbroke put together have done. These ministers make religion a cold and flinty-hearted thing, having neither principles of right actions nor bowels of compassion. They strip the love of God of its beauty and leave the throng of religion a huge, horrible, repulsive form. It is a religion for oppressors, tyrants, man-stealers, and thugs. It is not that pure and undefiled religion, which is from above, and which is first pure, then peaceable, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy, but a religion which favors the rich against the poor, which exalts the proud above the humble, which divides mankind into two classes, tyrants and slaves, which says to the man in chains, stay there, and to the oppressor, oppress on. It is a religion which may be professed and enjoyed by all the robbers and enslavers of mankind. It makes God a respecter of persons, denies his fatherhood of the race, and tramples in the dust the great truth of the brotherhood of man.
All this we affirm to be true of the popular church and the popular worship of our land and nation, a religion, a church, and a worship which, on the authority of inspired wisdom, we pronounce to be an abomination in the sight of God. In the language of Isaiah, the American church might be well addressed. Bring no more vain oblations, incense, and abomination unto me. The new moons and Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies. I cannot away with this. It is iniquity, even the solemn meeting. Your new moons and your appointed feast, my soul hateth. They have trouble to me. I am weary to bear them. And when ye spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes from you. Yea, when ye make my many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Cease to do evil, learn to do well, seek judgment, relive the oppressed, judge for the fatherless, plead for the widow. The American church is guilty when viewed in connection with what it's doing to uphold slavery, but is superlative guilty when viewed in connection with the ability to abolish slavery, the sin of which is the guilty is one of omission as well as commission. Albert Barnes but uttered what the common sense of every man at all observant of the actual state of the case will receive as truth when he declared that there is no power out of the church that could sustain slavery an hour if it were not sustained in it. Let the religious press, the pulpit, the Sunday school, the conference meeting, the great ecclesiastical, missionary, Bible, and tract associations of the land array their immense powers against slavery and slave holding, and the whole system of crime and blood would be scattered to the winds. And that they do not do this involves them in the most awful responsibility of which they might conceive. In prosecuting the anti-slavery enterprise, we have been asked to spare the church, to spare the ministry. But how? We ask, could such a thing be done? We are met on the threshold of our efforts for the redemption of the slave by the church and the ministry of the country in battle arrayed against us, and we are compelled to fight or flee. From what quarter, I beg to know, has proceeded a fire so deadly upon our ranks during the last 2 years as from the northern pulpit? As for the champions of the oppressors, of chosen men of American theology have appeared, men honored for their so-called piety and their real learning. The Lords of Buffalo, the Sprigs of New York, the Lathrops of Auburn, the Coxes of Spencers of Brooklyn, the Gannets of Sharps of Boston, the Deweys of Washington, and the other great religious lights of the land have, in utter denial of the authority of him by whom they profess to be called to the ministry, deliberately taught us against the example or the Hebrews and against the remonstrance of the apostles. They teach that we ought to obey man's law before the law of God.
My spirit wearies of such blasphemy, and how such men can be supported as the standing types and representatives of Jesus Christ is a mystery which I leave others to penetrate. And speaking of the American church, however, let it be distinctly understood that I mean the great mass of the religious organizations of our land. There are exceptions, and I thank God that there are. Noble men may be found scattered all over these northern states, of whom Henry Ward Beecher of Brooklyn, Samuel J. May of Syracuse, and my esteemed friend, Reverend R.R. Raymond, on the platform are shining examples. And let me say further, that these men lies that upon these men lies the duty to inspire our ranks with high religious faith and zeal, and to cheer us on in the great mission of the slave's redemption from his chains. One is struck with the difference between the attitude of the American church towards the anti slavery movement and that occupied by the churches in England towards a similar movement in that country. There, the church, true to its mission of ameliorating, of elevating, and improving the condition of mankind, came forward promptly, bound up the wounds of the West Indian slave, and restored him to his liberty. There, the question of emancipation was a high religious question. It was demanded in the name of humanity and according to the law of the living God. The Sharps, the Clarksons, the Wilberforces, the Buxtons, the Burchills, and the Nibbs were alike famous for their piety and for their philanthropy. The anti slavery movement there was not an anti church movement, for the reason that the church took its full share in prosecuting that movement. And the anti slavery movement in this country will cease to be an anti church movement when the church of this country shall assume a favorable instead of a hostile position towards that movement. Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation, as embodied in the two great political parties, is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 millions of your countrymen. You hurl your anathemas at the crowned headed tyrants of Russia and Austria, and pride yourselves on your democratic institutions, while you yourselves consent to be the mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina. You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad. Honor them with banquets, greet them with ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. You glory in your refinement and your universal education, yet you maintain a system of as barbarous and dreadful as ever sustained the character of a nation. A system begun in avarice, supported in pride, and perpetrated in cruelty. You shed tears over fallen Hungary and make the sad story of her wrongs the theme of your poets, statesmen, and orators, till your gallant sons are ready to fly to arms to vindicate her cause against her oppressors. But in regard to the 10,000 wrongs of the American slave, you would enforce the strictest silence and would hail him as an enemy of the nation who dares to make those wrongs the subject of public discourse.
You are all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland, but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America. You discourse eloquently on the dignity of your labor, yet you sustain a system which in its very essence casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery, to throw off the 3-penny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hard-earned farthing from the grasp of the black laborers of your country. You profess to believe that of one blood, God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of all the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another. Yet you notoriously hate, in the glory of your hatred, all men whose skins are not colored like your own. You declare before the world, and are understood by the world to declare that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator with a certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and yet you hold securely in the bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose. A seventh part of the inhabitants of your country. Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to mocking earth. It is an antagonistic force in the government, the only thing that seriously disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride. It breeds insolence. It promotes vice. It shelters crime. It is a curse to the earth that supports it, and yet you cling to it as if it is the sheet anchor of all your hopes. Oh, be warned of horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from you the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 million crushing and destroy it forever. But in reply to all this, that I have now denounced is, in fact, the guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States, that the right to hold and to hunt slaves is part of the Constitution framed by the illustrations of our father in this republic. Then I dare do affirm, notwithstanding all I have said before, your father stooped to palter with us in the double sense, and to keep the word of promise to the ear, but to break it to the heart. And instead of being the honest men I have before declared them to be, they were the veriest impostors that ever practiced on mankind.
This is the we all get that one word that's tongue-tied. I'm sorry. This is the inevitable conclusion and form. There is no conclusion, and from it there is no escape. But I differ from those who charge this baseness on the framers of the Constitution of the United States. It is a slander upon their memory, at least so I believe. There is not time now to argue the constitutional question at length, nor have I the ability to discuss it as it ought to be discussed. The subject has been handled with masterly power by Lysander Spooner, Esquire, by William Goodell, by Samuel E. Swall, Esquire, and last, though not least, by Garrett Smith, Esquire. These gentlemen have, as I think, fully and clearly vindicated the Constitution from any design to support slavery for an hour. Fellow citizens, there is no matter in respect to which the people of the North have allowed themselves to be so ruinously imposed upon as that of the pro-slavery character of the Constitution. In that instrument, I hold there is neither warrant, license, nor sanction of the hateful thing, but interpret it as it ought to be interpreted. The Constitution is a glorious liberty document. Read its preamble, consider its purpose. Is slavery among them? Is it at the gateway, or is it to argue this question on the present occasion? Let me ask, if it be not somewhat singular that if the Constitution were intended to be, by its framers and adopters, a slave-holding instrument, why neither slavery, slaveholding, nor slave can anywhere be found in it. What would be thought of an instrument drawn up, legally drawn up, for the purpose of entitling the city of Rochester to a tract of land in which no mention of land was made? Now, there are certain rules of interpretation for the proper understanding of all legal instruments. These rules are well established. They are plain, common sense rules, such as you and I and all of us can understand and apply without having passed years in the study of law. I scout the idea that the question of the constitutionality or unconstitutionality of slavery is not a question for the people. I hold that every American citizen has a right to form an opinion of the Constitution and to propagate that opinion, and to use all honorable means to make his opinion the prevailing one. Without this right, the liberty of an American citizen would be as insecure as that of a Frenchman. Ex-Vice President Dallas tells us that the Constitution is an object to which no American mind can be too attentive and no American heart too devoted. He further says the Constitution and its words is plain and intelligible and is meant for the homebred, unsophisticated understanding of our fellow citizens. Senator Buren tells us that the Constitution is the fundamental law that which controls all others. The character of our liberties, which every citizen has a personal interest in understanding thoroughly. The testimony of Senator Breeze, Lewis Case, and many others that might be named, who are everywhere esteemed as sound lawyers, so regard the Constitution. I take it, therefore, that it is not presumption in a private citizen to form an opinion of that instrument.
Now take the Constitution according to its plain reading, and I defy the presentation of any single pro-slavery clause in it. On the other hand, it will be found to contain principles and purposes entirely hostile to the existence of slavery. I have detained my audience entirely too long already. At some future point, I will gladly avail myself of an opportunity to give this subject a full and fair discussion. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work to the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not shortened, and the doom of slavery is certain. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope, while drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence. The great principles it contains and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old path of its fathers without interference. The time was when such could be done. Long established customs of hurtful character could formally fence themselves in and do their evil work with social impunity. Knowledge was then confined and enjoyed by the privileged few, and the multitude walked on the mental darkness. But a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The armor of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. It makes the pathway over and under the sea, as well as on the earth. Wind, steam, and lightning are its charter agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. The far-off and almost fabulous Pacific rolls in grandeur at our feet. The celestial empire, the mystery of the ages, is being solved. The fiat of the Almighty, let there be light, has not yet spent its force. No abuse, no outage without in taste, sport, avarice, can now hide itself from the all-pervading light. The iron shoe, the crippled foot of China must be seen in contrast with nature. Africa must rise and put on her unwoven garment. Ethiopia shall stretch out her hand unto God. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it. Godspeed, the year of Jubilee, the wide world o'er. When from the galling chains set free, thou oppressed shall be vilely bend the knee, and wear the yoke of tyranny, like brutes no more. The year will come and freedom's reign, to man his plundered fights again restore. Godspeed the day when the human blood shall cease to flow, and every claim be understood. The claims of human brotherhood, and each return evil good. Not blow for blow, that day will come, all feuds to end, and change into the faithful friend, each foe. Godspeed the hour, the glorious hour, when none on earth shall exercise a lordly power, nor a tyrant's presence cower, but all the manhood stature tower. By equal birth, that hour will come to each to all, and from his prison house the thrall go forth, until that year, day, hour arrive. With head and heart and hand I'll strive, to break the rod and rend the greave, to spoiler of the prey deprive. So witness heaven, and never from the chosen post, whatever peril or cost, be driven.
Amen. Mm.
That is Frederick Douglass, everyone. And this is his response. What to the slave is the 4th of July in 1852. And so that was an address to Mr. President, friends, and fellow citizens. Rev, I appreciate you, sharing this and suggesting this. This is the first time I've seen and or read this document. So I've got a lot of thoughts, but as you have been exposed to this document before, would you give us your thoughts on it? Because there's a lot in there, though.
There is a lot, but I would not dare try and speak after such a magnificent orator. I think he said it, and for as much as this was written in 1852, man, it's just as relevant today. It's just as relevant today, and so, man, I think that there was a mic drop. Like, what can you say after that? Yeah. I'm sitting here standing like that brother that came that was next in line after Martin gave the I have a dream speech. You done seen that Key and Peele sketch where it's like yeah, I ain't got nothing to say. I ain't even try and tip that, man. So yeah, the floor is yours, brother. Go ahead.
It took him a while to get going. He definitely set the stage, in the beginning. But once he, got into the meat of what he was trying to say, it was definitely powerful. And, just called things out for what they were in the hypocrisy, right? How can slavery stand when you hold yourself in such high esteem? And we find ourselves in these issues still today. Unreconciled, and there has to be atonement and reparations, reconciliation, in order for us to move forward. That's what I was saying earlier, and I believe until that's done, we're just going to continue, to go along, and we'll see these incremental changes where we're feeling like, well, things weren't as bad as they were a decade ago, and they weren't as bad as they were 2 decades ago, but we're seeing all this unrest, right? And I think we're going to continue to see that. And, it's almost like a roller coaster, right? We were climbing and we're here now, at the precipice, and we can continue to climb, but I think we're on a downfall now. And how are we going to respond? How is the country going to respond to that? The powers that be. I wish I could be optimistic as Frederick Douglass is, but I'm not at this point, sadly.
after we finished reading the Declaration of Independence, I was kind of discussing how trauma can be genetically, transferred. It could pass down. And I don't know about you, but when he was, speaking on the plight of the enslaved, I felt that,
Mm.
I felt it, when he was talking about how, people's lives, was at the mercy of a card, at the hands of a card game, and families being ripped apart, and mothers being whipped to keep up, and the chains cutting into the flesh, and the babies being ripped out of their arms, and all of that. I felt it. I felt it, and I could near see it. As vivid. Um, as if it was happening, right in front of me. And, I could also see the correlation of those same events happening right now today, and many of the videos that we've seen, police officers literally ripping babies out of, black mothers' arms, what I'm saying, and throwing them around and slamming the mother down, and handcuffing her and stuff, and seeing our young brothers and sisters, chained, on their arms and wrists and around their waist and ankles, and on these chain gangs, in the orange suits, and I could see the slave patrol on the horses, just and in contrast with them today in their patrol cars, so I, the trauma, it was a hard document, for me to read, and the parts I was listening to, it was a very emotional experience for me. It was difficult, and there's a, I forget the author. She's a professor somewhere. It'll come back to me. But she wrote a book called Post Traumatic Slave Disorder. And that's one of the first times I heard of the idea of slavery, the trauma of slavery being passed down throughout generations. But it's always um, a difficult time reading that uh, uh, his declaration upon the 4th of July, and just some particular things that touch back to the trauma. It's always difficult for me. I'm a very emotional person, and as you guys probably notice, I get heated on some things, but my emotions just. Thank you. I don't know who posted that.
Oh, I
A
put that
book.
in there.
Yeah, Joy DeGray. I think that sounds about right. Yeah, post traumatic slave syndrome. Amen. Who posted that?
I did. I put that in there for you. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, but yeah. So I guess that's my thoughts on that. Now, like I said, I will let Frederick's work speak for itself, because he's a very, very like I said before, a brilliant man, very proficient orator, and I think yeah, that was a mic drop. He said it. He said what needed to be said right there. And I am, I think I am as optimistic as he is. I don't think it's like a tomorrow type thing, but I think it's coming. You know, it's going to get greater later.
It's going to get greater later after the war.
Yeah, yeah,
I think war is coming before peace.
yeah.
Unfortunately. Um, Yeah, you know what's sad is old as that document is, how relevant it is today. You know, that's it's sad, it's unfortunate. Um
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely was emotional reading it. It was, you know, I'm reading it for the first time and I don't want to, you know, read it, you know, scholarly articles for post-traumatic slave syndrome. You know, I want to read it with feeling. Um but you don't know what you're reading. So you're just reading and you're trying to, you know, ride the words, and you know, I found myself getting lost in the words, and um you know, the story when, you know, they were talking about, you know, she's trying to keep up and the sweat is dripping baby and you can hear the chains and the crack of the whip. Like I was doing that reading, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
reading it for the first time, but I'm also, you know, I could see the dust being kicked up and the rocks and the gravel and the dirty feet and, you know, just the pain, the beating, harsh, unforgiving sun. You know, I could, you know, I felt as you know, as I was there, as much as I could be there, you know,
Yeah.
the fresh smell of blood from flesh being torn away, you know, the pain of just being human, not just being a man watching your mother, your sister, your daughter, whoever it was, be whipped and be forced to take it and keep going, you know. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's something else.
Yeah. The imagery that he paints is very vivid. Very vivid. And yeah, yeah. It's, I know it's, your first time reading it. I doubt it'll be your last time after being exposed to it, because like I said, you know, and there's certain pieces of writing that I tend to go back to, because of course my Bible is one I continually go back to, but um it's just very, very just powerful, history that I wish more of us would, pay attention to, especially the younger generation, and it's one of the reasons why, I stopped using the N word, because I started getting exposed to literature like this, and understanding, like, man, like I can't, after hearing, like that, whoever, that could have been my great 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 grandma, I don't know, but he seen that. It wasn't just something that he, kind of thought up. You know what I'm saying? Like, Frederick seen that. That was real to him. He experienced that. He escaped from slavery. You know, he experienced, these things that he wrote about, but he also seen these things, like you said, like the party was saying, like, they would, ship him out late in the middle of the night, and he'd hear them, going past his house, the chains rattling going past his house. He experienced that stuff, you know what I'm saying? So how can I continue to, like, use such derogatory words that was meant to demean, debase, and just like break us, you know it ain't no taking that back. I don't want it. You know what I'm saying? I don't want it nowhere in my vocabulary. You know what I'm saying? And so when people, like, continue to use, like, the N word, it's like, you really, you just don't know. Like, it ain't no taking that back. No, that needs to be utterly destroyed. You know, utterly destroyed. That's, to me, it's like, uh I think of it like, uh a brimstone from hell, that came up, on the earth, and people like, yeah, we're gonna preserve this for what? You know what I'm saying? That's a piece of hell. Get rid of it. Like, no. And same thing with the N word. Like, what are you trying to keep that around for? Like, nah, nah. Like, man. So I don't know. I'm off on a tangent again.
No, no, you're good. You know, it's I have my perspectives on a lot of things, and I'm usually in a space or a position where I'm sharing it. So it's good to hear it. I do like to listen, probably almost as much as I like to talk. Almost.
Yeah.
But shout out to Rob. He says, great podcast so far, guys. Very powerful and educational. I definitely appreciate that. I know it's a long one. That document is 20 pages long, but it wouldn't be done justice to read just excerpts of it.
Yeah.
You really need to indulge in the whole document.
Hey,
And
Mawad, if you could close some of your extra tabs because you pixelating and breaking up a little bit. Yeah.
Let me go ahead and handle that. Yeah, so I think that's really important for folks to digest. And I will chop this one up. We did a hard break at the first hour after the the Declaration of Independence, and then we've got this. So that should give us a nice little break before we jump into Frederick Douglass's response or address, if you will. So I think that'll be good. How am I coming through now, Ram?
Yeah, a little bit better, but
A little bit better.
Yeah, it's still
I done closed most of my windows.
yeah.
I got a lot of them open. I've got I'm doing a lot more interviews on location now, so I'm rendering a podcast for next week. I hope I'll have it ready by next week. It takes a long time to get those things edited, so
Yeah.
I got every window closed now except for text, so it should be going pretty well.
Okay.
Is it going pretty well? Oh, I guess I am in the yellow. Huh? Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know what's up with that.
It's just the stuff that you close is probably still cached in your memory, and that's all. It'll catch up.
Let it clean itself up.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to go into the 13th Amendment really quick? Because I think that piece is important. It should only take a second there. I'll let you do this one since we got to the end and I was like, all right, I might as well just read this poem. I'm kind of flowing there. So I wasn't trying to get too crazy.
No, that's fine. So after reading Declaration of Independence and Frederick Douglass responds to the 4th of July, it kind of brings us naturally to our Constitution, which Frederick Douglass, you heard guys argued that the Constitution did not support the idea of slavery. And which ironically, at some point, America figured they need to make a amendment to the Constitution to get rid of slavery. But let's read and see what the 13th Amendment actually says. And so there's 2 sections to the 13th Amendment. The first one says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment. That's a key part right there. Except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2 says Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. There are exceptions I found out that have been argued in court to Section 1 of the Constitution. And one exception is ironically enough, is if there's a highway being built by your house, they can force you to come out and help build that highway or that road system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's 5 states. Okay. And so that exception part, right? Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. So in other words, what they're saying is, look, if you get convicted of a crime, You go to
Hmm.
court and they find you guilty, then you can be put back into slavery. And so, right after this amendment was ratified, we have what were called, I think, the Black Codes. Um, I think that Black Codes or Vagrant Codes or something like that. Dang it, it's on the tip of my tongue. It'll come to me, but it's right around that terminology, vagrant codes or black codes. But anyway, what they would do is you have all these newly freed enslaved people, and so the what happened was the states and counties and cities and stuff, they came up with these vagrant laws, and so now you have these freed enslaved people. They have nowhere to live, they have no jobs, and so they make these laws and say, oh well, between these hours, if you just hanging around, it's illegal, we're going to arrest you. And they would do that, and they round up all these freed slaves, convict them of a crime, and now force them right back into slavery. They came up with all kinds of crazy little laws like that. It was other things that they did, besides the vagrant laws. Sometimes they would just simply just grab them and force them back onto the plantations. Our government, the military, actually participated in this. The so-called blue coats, the ones we always rah for, they participated in forcing freedmen back into slavery, and forced them to stay on the plantations, and so forth. Um, so when we hear about you know the uh uh you know uh the abolition of slavery, it wasn't just such a smooth process. It really wasn't. I'm um i'm reading I'm a weird person. So I'm reading one book. I'm rereading a book called Brainwash by Tim Burwell. I think I mentioned that one to you before. But I'm also listening to an audiobook at the same time. And this is on the what is shoot, the words right there on the tip of my tongue. What is it? Recreation. Mm, I'm so tongue tied after reading both of those
I
documents.
can't help you, Rev, unfortunately.
Yeah, Reformation, not Reformation. The one that happened after slavery. Reconciliation. No, it'll come to me. But I'm listening to another book. Where they try to reform, and reshape the country and stuff. Afterwards, the word eludes me. It's ref or something. Um, you don't know what I'm talking.
Reconciliation.
Say it again.
Reconciliation.
No, 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 no. It was an actual like time period. Um, reconstitution. Shoot. Hold on. Let me see. I got it. I got it right here. I'll just. But anyway, so I'm reading this book and I'm listening to the other book, but so there's this time period, after slavery, and things were not just like, oh, okay, we're free, and what I'm saying, now everybody's just off living their life. No, things happened, and it wasn't just like this, real smooth, transition and reconstruction. There we go. Yeah,
Ah, yes,
the
yes, yes.
the Reconstruction period. I'm listening to a book on that. That is fascinating, and like I like history, and I consider myself like I like to read about history and stuff like that and research it or whatever. And
Mhm.
it eludes me why I never study the Reconstruction period. So I'm doing that now, and man, it is mind blowing. Like there's a whole nother level to this game that, like, you know, ain't even being talked about. But when I get done with that book, yeah, I'm gonna have a lot to talk about because man, I'm finding out some new information. Just like, oh, okay. But anyway, was not this real smooth period, that people like to think about. You know what I'm saying? And the
Right.
13th Amendment, as we pay attention to it and we see it, for a long time, our community, we just thought like, oh, okay, 13th Amendment, abolish slavery. Well, no, it did not. Really, what it did was it took slavery out of individual hands, and put it into the hands of the states. And so right now today there's 5 states that participate in this exception here, Texas being one of them, where they force their prisoners to perform various types of forced labor, and there's no compensation for it. And I know a lot of times we hear about prisoners getting paid 10 6 cents, 15 cents, stuff like that, and we abhorred at that, which is horrible, and it's may as well just be forced slavery, forced labor as well. um, but there's still 5 states that are like, look, we ain't got to pay you, we ain't paying you, and guess what, we can make you work, so you gonna work. And
Mm-hmm.
so slavery still exists in this country right now to this very day as we're speaking. um, Inmates are forced to do menial tasks, from mopping floors, cooking in the cafeterias, and washing the laundry and stuff, all the way to picking cotton. People still pick cotton down in Texas. Inmates still pick cotton. Yes.
Mm.
Chop wood, all this stuff, right? And when you look at this in context of this mass incarceration system that we've built, this system, where we actively seek to imprison people, what I'm saying, is for these purposes, for this free labor. America has an addiction that it's never gotten off of. We like to pretend like, oh, we're past that, but right now today in 2021 we're still forcing people to pick cotton, you know
Mm.
and what again, what horrifies me about that is that is, we and me and you, we both know that it is most often young black men that are getting, what I'm saying, wrapped up in these systems. They're actively seeking to imprison us. We get longer jail sentences and so forth. And a lot of times, we find that the young men are doing it to themselves, simply out of ignorance, because they don't know any better. They haven't been taught better. And we was talking about this, I think, on the last or maybe the one before, how we're being sold these false narratives of ourselves. And we're going out there and we're trying to emulate the things that we're seeing on these images that are being put in front of us, you know, to be the gangster, the drug dealer, or whatever, and this fast, easy money and look a certain way and all this and that, which is all, illusion. And then, uh, we got, 18-year-olds and, 17-year-olds getting life sentences and 50 years, and it's all for labor. You
Mhm.
signing yourself up for slavery, literally. You're getting put in chains. You're being forced to work. You know, um, a lot of places, a lot of the states that may pay, and I say that very loosely, when you're getting, uh, 12 cents an hour,
Right.
it's like, okay, either you go and work, or you're going to do 100% of your time. That's the only way you can,
Mhm.
they incentivize, like, okay, you go get this 12 cents, and we're going to give you a little bit of good time so you can probably get out of here early. And it's like, for real,
Hmm.
like, no. So the system is corrupt. it's set up against us. We know that, from the cradle to the, seal bars is what they want to see, and this here, there's I was telling you, the lady, the lady that took John Lewis's seat, her and another congressman, they're presenting a bill. They're trying to get a bill through pass, that would get rid of this exception, you know, and there's no need for this exception at all. But I don't think that goes far enough,
Well, you say there's no need for the exception. It's like, well, I think they feel like there's a need for the exception to be there.
Yeah, well, who is they? Who feels like, why should anybody get put into slavery? I don't care what crime you commit, you shouldn't get put into slavery. Personally, I feel like this. Like, prison is the most, it's the easy way out. And I mean that not in the sense of, criminals going to prison. I mean that in the sense of lawmakers not using their brain to think of more creative forms of reform, and not necessarily punishment. I think that the only people who should get imprisoned is those who commit violence and not amongst upon another individual. So, if you're violent to another individual, in a very harmful way, then yeah, maybe prison should be a option. But I don't mean like violence in the sense of like two teenagers, got into a fight or something like that. But like if you stab somebody, you shoot somebody, you rape somebody, like yeah, then maybe you need to be, kind of locked away. But like if you commit a non-violent crime, then I think there should be some, and I'm not the one to say what it is, but I think there's people out
Okay,
there
because I'm
smarter.
like, that sounds like we would have anarchy, right? It's like, oh, okay, so we're not going to lock you up. Go ahead, steal the car, break it to the house. No one's home. As long as it's not a home invasion, go ahead and steal.
No, 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 no,
Do some
no.
white collar
Yeah,
crime.
no. There has to be, consequences for your actions, of course, and that's why I say I'm not advocating like, like, oh, you just, go on. Like, no, there got to be consequences, and I'm not the one to kind of, like I said, to figure out what it is, but at the same time, I think just locking everybody away and just like, okay, well, just go to jail, like, come on, that's really not working. I mean, if you think about it, it's really not working. Like, America incarcerates the largest percentage of its population than any other country in the world, and crime continues to happen. People continue to commit the same crimes. It ain't like no new crimes are being like committed where it's like, oh, we got to make a law and make this a crime because so many people are, whistling while they walk down the street. So we're gonna make that a crime. Like, no new crimes are being, created. People are continually stealing cars, breaking in houses, robbing people, killing people. The same crimes are still happening. So, just locking people up, you know, ain't really working, if you ask me.
I agree on a whole level. I think, ultimately, incarceration was supposed to be rehabilitation,
Mhm.
right? So you're in there, you get, you take some classes, some anger management, you discuss or take some workshops that, will go into why you did what you did, give you some knowledge, skills, and abilities that maybe you're missing, right? Because someone could, if they're doing a burglary or if they're robbing or doing whatever, maybe even is drugs, right? Why are they doing drugs? Is there what in their life do they need to have help with that will make it so that is not a choice that they need to make, right?
Mhm.
Or if I can't feed my family or take care of myself because everything is set up here so ridiculously. I can't afford rent. I can't afford this or anything else. So I'm stealing or I'm selling drugs and it's survival. Then okay, you lock me up, you let me back out into the exact same situation, right? It's just a holding cell at this point.
Yeah.
There's no rehabilitation
Yeah.
going on,
No
you know,
reform.
and then when you come out, it's like, hey, you know what, we're going to cut off all the resources from you, so you figure it out, and
Yeah.
if you reoffend, we're just going to add the points on and put you in longer.
Yeah.
But eventually you'll be back out in the street and be someone's problem if we don't, you know, find a way to you know, put our arms around you and try to, you know, give you the tools that you're missing and address those issues, right? And of course, that's not going to go for every hardened criminal, but for a good majority, you know, I get what you're saying there, but I think that needs to, you know, the big thing, we've gotten away from that, right?
Yeah, you know, and the thing is, and that's another point, you know, and which shows, you know, America is purposeful in what it's doing. It relegates, you know, it double punishes people. Like, okay, I didn't serve my time, I didn't deal whatever then, you know, was required of me by law, you know, for whatever crime I've committed. But now, you know, I'm walking around with this X over my head. You know, I got this scarlet letter on, you know what I'm saying? And I'm now a second class citizen because I
Mm-hmm.
made a mistake earlier in my life. You know, I'm now relegated to being a second class citizen within my own country. You know, there's a lot of issues, and we've been going about 3 hours, so I'm gonna let this one go. But I think next week I would love to talk about then a little bit more on the 13th Amendment and the incarceration process in America, and you know, just doing things differently because there have been other countries that have been successful in reforming uh their prison systems and doing it a different way and seeing their recidivism rates, you know, drop.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think America is interested in having its recidivism rates drop because now, you know, they lose out on that free labor and that cheap labor and so forth. So, yeah, let's maybe pick this up next week. But I
Oh, I
know I
like
got to
that.
get home because it's like 9 o'clock and the wife called 2 hours ago.
No, I feel you. I understand you. You know, this was a good one. You know, I love learning new things and being exposed to, you know, new ideas um, and history for sure. Uh, Gave us a chance to reflect on the 4th of July, Independence Day. I think you were saying, I don't know if we said that on air or not, but it's not really a holiday that you celebrate. We talked about Juneteenth a few weeks ago. So it's apropos that these things are kind of close together. We can have both of these discussions. And we'll continue to have them, right?
Amen.
And we'll definitely revisit this. So I think it was really good. So what is the name of your show, Rev?
Salvage Souls with Reverend Ellington.
Salvaging the souls. All I have in my mind is savages.
No, salvage. Salvage.
Well, that's what the kids say, right? You know, I'm a savage. You know,
Oh.
I'm a savage soul survivor for the salvage. You know, there's a lot of S's in there. So
Okay. I gotta talk to the kids more.
yeah, you do for real. Well, for Salvaging Souls, Reverend Ellington, I am Marwan Cameron. This is the Conduit. Come and see us next time.
Amen. Amen.
All right.